This is called ischemia reperfusion injury, and it's why the majority of people who go on a ventilator are dying. Make no mistake, intubation will kill people who have COVID-19 by greatly accelerating the oxidative damage caused by the virus's processes. Hi there, Dr. Ben Young here. You are listening to one of my two podcasts primarily focused on talking with a very few and specific group of people, namely my patients who are above average and very intelligent, and also my professional colleagues who work primarily alongside me here in San Antonio, Texas. But this episode is going to be a little different because it actually applies to a broader audience. I want everybody who listens to me normally to listen to it, of course, but I also think that you might want to pass this one along. Last night, a couple of friends of mine sent me the same document. It was originally posted on Zero Hedge, a website, and it's entitled The Spartacus COVID Letter. And it's a long document, and I'm not going to read you everything from it. And down the road, I might read the whole thing if there's interest in that. The reason I want to do that is because I think it is a very technical letter. I think it's difficult sometimes to read it, but maybe listening to it, it would make it move a little easier. And at least my hope would be that what I read to you would give you the ability to look into it further for yourself and also look at one or many of the 550 citations from this document. The section I'm going to read from is on COVID-19 pathophysiology. There may be some other sections related to that I will read as well. And I plan to at least tell you the number of citations they give for every statement. If I were to tell you the citations themselves, it would get too long and cumbersome. But on the other hand, if I don't give you the numbers of citations, it may imply or you may think that there is no evidence or weight to what I'm saying. This isn't a fair fight, I want to say on the outset, that I'm giving one side of an argument that's equally debated. That's not the case. I think what has happened to us is that things have been repressed and kept out of the ability for people to understand what's going on. What I want to do is at least put forward a letter that has gone into a great deal of credible research that is available to anybody else who wishes to look into it. So without any further ado, here is the Spartacus letter. And they've said this is revision 2 dated 9/28/2021, so just a few days old. And the section is on COVID-19 pathophysiology. I understand that for many, a lot of the words will be sounding foreign to you. Hang in there. There's a lot you will understand. And for some who may receive this, you will understand this. So hopefully you'll know what to do and respond to it appropriately. COVID-19 is not a viral pneumonia. It is a viral vascular endotheliitis and attacks the lining of blood vessels, particularly the small pulmonary alveolar capillaries, leading to endothelial cell activation and sloughing, coagulopathy, sepsis, pulmonary edema, and acute respiratory disease syndrome or ARDS-like symptoms. This is a disease of the blood and blood vessels, the circulatory system. Any pneumonia that it causes is secondary to that. 6 citations. In severe cases, this leads to sepsis, 2 citations, blood clots, 3 citations, and multiple organ failure, 3 citations. including hypoxic and inflammatory damage to various vital organs, such as the brain, 4 citations. Heart, COVID-19 was initially thought to cause myocarditis, but this has proven rare, 2 citations. Liver, 3 citations. Pancreas, 4 citations. Kidneys, 3 citations. And intestines, 3 citations. Some of the most common laboratory findings in COVID-19 are elevated D-dimer, elevated prothrombin time, elevated C-reactive protein, neutrophilia, lymphopenia, hypocalcemia, hypoferritinemia, and inflammatory cytokines, especially matching a profile of coagulopathy and immune system hyperactivation/immune cell exhaustion. 6 citations. COVID-19 can present as almost anything due to the wide tropism of SARS-CoV-2 for various tissues in the body's vital organs. While its most common initial presentation is respiratory illness and flu-like symptoms, it can present as brain inflammation, gastrointestinal disease, or even heart attack, stroke, or pulmonary embolism. 8 citations. COVID-19 is more severe in those with specific comorbidities such as obesity, diabetes, and hypertension. 2 citations. This is because these conditions involve endothelial dysfunction, which renders the circulatory system more susceptible to infection and injury by this particular virus. 2 citations. The vast majority of COVID-19 cases are mild and do not cause significant disease. 4 citations. 80% of known cases are mild and 20% are severe or critical. 3 citations. However, this ratio is only correct for known cases, not all infections. The number of actual infections is much, much higher. Consequently, the mortality and morbidity rate are lower than a CFR or case fatality rate may indicate. 3 citations. However, COVID-19 spreads very quickly, especially in densely populated areas with greater exposure to respiratory aerosols in public transport, meaning that there are a significant number of severely ill and critically ill patients appearing in a short time frame. 3 citations. SARS-CoV-2 spike binds to ACE2. 2 citations. ACE2, or angiotensin converting enzyme 2, is an enzyme that is part of the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, or RAAS. 2 citations. RAAS is a hormone control system that moderates blood pressure and fluid volume, i.e. osmolarity, of the circulatory system by controlling vascular tone and salt retention and excretion. 5 citations. This protein, ACE2, is ubiquitous in every part of the body that interfaces with the circulatory system, particularly in vascular endothelial cells and pericytes, brain astrocytes, renal tubules and podocytes, pancreatic islet cells, bile duct and intestinal epithelial cells, and the seminiferous ducts of the testes, all of which SARS-CoV-2 can potentially infect, not just the lungs. 3 citations. SARS-CoV-2 infects a cell as follows. SARS-CoV-2 spike undergoes a conformational change where the S1 trimers flip up and extend, locking onto ACE2 bound to the surface of a cell. TMPRSS2, or transmembrane protease serine 2, comes along and cuts off the heads of the spike, exposing the S2 stalk-shaped subunit inside. The remainder of the spike undergoes a conformational change that causes it to unfold like an extension ladder, embedding itself in the cell membrane. Then it folds back upon itself, pulling the viral membrane and the cell membrane together. The two membranes fuse, with the virus's proteins migrating out onto the surface of the cell. The SARS-CoV-2 nucleocapsid enters the cell, disgorging its genetic material and beginning the viral replication process, hijacking the cell's own structures to produce more virus. 3 citations. SARS-CoV-2 spike proteins embedded in a cell can actually cause human cells to fuse together, forming syncytia/MGCs, or multinucleated giant cells. 2 citations. They also have other pathogenic harmful effects. SARS-CoV-2's viroporins, such as its envelope and 3A proteins, act as calcium ion channels, introducing calcium into infected cells, a property that is shared with similar coronaviruses, such as SARS, which stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome. 3 citations. The virus suppresses the natural interferon response, resulting in delayed inflammation. SARS-CoV-2 N protein and ORF3A can also directly activate the NLRP3 inflammasome. 3 citations. Also, it suppresses the NRF2 antioxidant pathway. 4 citations. The suppression of ACE2 by binding with spike is claimed to cause a buildup of bradykinin that would otherwise be broken down by ACE2. But this is also contradicted by studies that show that spike ACE2 binding can upregulate ACE2 activity. 5 citations. The constant calcium influx into the cells is correlated with noticeable hypocalcemia, or low blood calcium, especially in people with vitamin D deficiencies and pre-existing endothelial dysfunction. 3 citations. The vasoactive peptide bradykinin upregulates CAMP, CGMP, COX or COX, and the phospholipase C activity. 9 citations. This, along with the ongoing expression of various SARS-CoV-2 viroporins, collectively results in prostaglandin release and vastly increased intracellular calcium signaling, including dumping of calcium 2-ion stores from the endoplasmic reticulum, which promotes highly aggressive ROS, or reactive oxygen species, release and ATP deletion. 5 citations. NADPH oxidase releases superoxide into the extracellular space. 3 citations. Superoxide radicals react with nitric oxide to form peroxynitrite. 4 citations. Peroxynitrite reacts with the tetrahydrobiopterin cofactor needed by endothelial nitric oxide synthase, destroying it and uncoupling the enzymes, causing nitric oxide synthase to synthesize more superoxide instead. 3 citations. This proceeds in a positive feedback loop until nitric oxide bioavailability in the circulatory system is depleted. 2 citations. Dissolving nitric oxide gas produced constantly by ENOS serves many important functions. 3 citations. But it is also antiviral against SARS-like coronaviruses preventing the palmitylation of the viral spike protein and making it harder for it to bind to host receptors. 3 citations. The loss of NO allows the virus to begin replicating with impunity in the body. Those with endothelial dysfunction, examples, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, old age, African American race, have redox equilibrium issues to begin with, giving the virus an advantage. 6 citations. Due to the extreme cytokine release triggered by these processes, the body summons a great deal of neutrophils and monocyte-derived alveolar macrophages to the lungs. 4 citations. Cells of the innate immune system are the first-line defenders against pathogens. They work by engulfing invaders and trying to attack them with enzymes that produce powerful oxidants like SOD and MPO. 2 citations. Superoxide dismutase takes superoxide and makes hydrogen peroxide, and myeloperoxidase takes hydrogen peroxide and chlorine ions and makes hypochlorous acid, which is many, many times more reactive than sodium hypochlorite bleach. 4 citations. Neutrophils have a nasty trick. They can also eject these enzymes into the extracellular space where they will continuously spit out peroxide and bleach into the bloodstream. This is called neutrophil extracellular trap formation, or NETosis. 2 citations. In severe and critical COVID-19, there is actually rather severe NETosis. 3 citations. COVID-19's pathology. In severe and critical COVID-19, there is actually rather severe NETosis. 4 citations. COVID-19's pathology is, from this point onward, dominated by extreme oxidative stress and neutrophil respiratory burst. Heme iron is stripped out of the heme by hypochlorous acid. No amount of supplemental oxygen can oxygenate blood that chemically refuses to bind O2 due to HOCl, hydrochlorous acid, outcompeting O2 at its binding sites. 3 citations. Red blood cells lose the ability to transport oxygen, causing the sufferer to turn blue in the face. 2 citations. Unliganded iron, hydrogen peroxide, and superoxide in the bloodstream undergo the Haber-Weiss and the Fenton reactions, producing extremely reactive hydroxyl radicals that violently strip electrons from surrounding fats and DNA, oxidizing them severely. 8 citations. And then the article gives the 2 reactions, they're chemical reactions. I can't describe them to you. So that's for you chemists to look up. Hydroxyl radicals are extremely reactive, have a very short half-life in the body, and cannot be detoxified by enzymatic action. They occur naturally in the upper atmosphere where they destroy pollutants. They are also extremely destructive to biological matter, and in industrial applications, they are often generated on purpose and introduced into wastewater streams to sanitize them through their powerful oxidative effect. 6 citations. In severe hypoxia, cellular metabolic shifts cause ATP to break down into hypoxanthine, which, upon the reintroduction of oxygen, causes xanthine oxidase to produce tons of highly damaging radicals that attack tissue. 4 citations. In the mitochondria, succinate buildup due to sepsis-induced hypoxia does the exact same thing. When oxygen is reintroduced, it makes superoxide radicals. 4 citations. This is called ischemia reperfusion injury, and it's why the majority of people who go on a ventilator are dying. Make no mistake, intubation will kill people who have COVID-19 by greatly accelerating the oxidative damage caused by the virus's processes. 4 citations. The end stage of COVID-19 is severe lipid peroxidation, where fats in the body start to quote-unquote rust due to damage by oxidative stress. 2 citations. This drives autoimmunity. Oxidized lipids appear as foreign objects to the immune system, which recognizes and forms antibodies against OSEs, or oxidation-specific epitopes. 2 citations. Also, oxidized lipids feed directly into pattern recognition receptors, triggering even more inflammation and summoning even more cells of the innate immune system that release even more destructive enzymes. 2 citations. This condition is not unknown to medical science. The actual name for all of this is acute sepsis. 3 citations. We know this is happening in COVID-19 because people who have died of the disease have noticeable ferroptosis signatures in their tissues, as well as various oxidative stress biomarkers such as nitrotyrosine, 4-HNE, and malondialdehyde. 7 citations. There are many other peculiarities involved in COVID-19, such as increases in gene activity associated with ubiquitination. 2 citations. Endothelial cell activation. 4 citations. VWF release. 3 citations. Mast cell activation. 2 citations. And complement system activation. 5 citations. Overall, the inflammatory profile of COVID-19 is somewhat like a severe autoimmune reaction. It is reminiscent of lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, but centered in the vasculature. 4 citations. Hyperinflammatory COVID-19 is a severe SARS-like inflammatory syndrome that can put a sufferer in the ICU. It is not to be trifled with. However, if hyperinflammatory COVID-19 and the associated sepsis can be effectively treated, then the lethality of the virus will be lessened significantly. Next section, COVID-19 treatments. In those who have critical COVID-19 induced sepsis, hypoxia, coagulopathy, and ARDS, the most common treatments are intubation, injected corticosteroids, and blood thinners. This is not the correct treatment for COVID-19. 3 citations. When you intubate someone with this condition, you are setting off a free radical bomb by supplying the cells with O2. It's a catch-22 because we need oxygen to make adenosine triphosphate, that is to live, but O2 is also the precursor of all these damaging radicals that lead to lipid peroxidation. 5 citations. The correct treatment for severe COVID-19 related sepsis is non-invasive ventilation, steroids, and antioxidant infusions. Most of the drugs repurposed for COVID-19 that show any benefit whatsoever in rescuing critically ill COVID-19 patients are antioxidants. 2 citations. N-acetylcysteine, melatonin, fluvozamax, budesonide, famotidine, cimetidine, and ranitidine are all antioxidants. 11 citations. Indomethacin prevents iron-driven oxidation of arachidonic acid to isoprostanes. One citation. There are powerful antioxidants such as apocynin that have not even been tested in COVID-19 patients yet, which could defang neutrophils, prevent lipid peroxidation, restore endothelial health, and restore oxygenation to the tissues. 3 citations. Scientists who know anything about pulmonary neutrophilia, ARDS, and redox biology have known or surmised much of this since March 2020. 1 citation. In April 2020, Swiss scientists confirmed that COVID-19 was a vascular endotheliitis. 1 citation. By late 2020, experts had already concluded that COVID-19 causes a form of viral sepsis. 2 citations. They also know that sepsis can be effectively treated by antioxidants. 3 citations. None of this information is particularly new, and yet, for the most part, it has not been acted upon. Doctors continue to use damaging intubation techniques despite high lung compliance and poor oxygenation, killing an untold number of critically ill patients with medical malpractice. 2 citations. Because of the way they are constructed, randomized controlled trials will never show any benefit for any antiviral against COVID-19, not remdesivir, not Kaletra, not HCQ, and not ivermectin. The reason for this is simple. For the patients that they have recruited for these studies, such as Oxford's ludicrous recovery study, the intervention is too late to have any positive effect. 2 citations. The clinical course of COVID-19 is such that by the time most people seek medical attention for hypoxia, their viral load has already tapered off to almost nothing. 1 citation. If someone is about 10 days post-exposure and has already been symptomatic for 5 days, there is hardly any virus left in their bodies, only cellular damage and derangement that has initiated a hyperinflammatory response. 1 citation. In these trials, they give antivirals to severely ill patients who have no virus in their bodies, only a delayed hyperinflammatory response, and then absurdly claim that antivirals have no utility in treating or preventing COVID-19. 1 citation. These clinical trials being cited by the media as evidence of the ineffectiveness of antivirals do not recruit people who are pre-symptomatic. They do not test pre-exposure or post-exposure prophylaxis. This is like using a defibrillator to shock only flatline and then absurdly claiming that defibrillators have no medical utility whatsoever when the patients refuse to rise from the dead. The intervention is too late. These trials for antivirals show systematic, egregious selection bias. They are providing a treatment that is futile to the specific cohort they are enrolling. 4 citations. India went against the instructions of the World Health Organization and mandated the prophylactic usage of ivermectin. They have almost completely eradicated COVID-19. 2 citations. The Indian Bar Association of Mumbai has brought criminal charges against WHO chief scientist Dr. Soumya Swaminathan for recommending against the use of ivermectin. 2 citations. Ivermectin is not, quote, horse dewormer, unquote. Yes, it is sold in veterinary form as a dewormer for animals. 1 citation. It has also been available in pill form for humans for decades as an antiparasitic drug. 1 citation. The media and the FDA have disingenuously claimed that because ivermectin is an antiparasitic drug, it has no utility as an antivirus. 2 citations. This is incorrect. Ivermectin has utility as an antiviral. It blocks importin, preventing nuclear import, effectively inhibiting viral access to cell nuclei. Many drugs currently on the market have multiple modes of action. Ivermectin is one such drug. It is both antiparasitic and antiviral. 5 citations. In Bangladesh, ivermectin costs $1.80 for an entire 5-day course. 1 citation. Remdesivir, which is toxic to the liver, costs $3,120 for a 5-day course of the drug. 1 citation. Billions of dollars of utterly useless remdesivir were sold to our governments on the taxpayer dime, and it ended up being totally useless for treating hyperinflammatory COVID-19. The media has hardly even covered this at all. 1 citation. The opposition to the use of generic ivermectin is not based in science. It is purely financially and politically motivated. An effective non-vaccine intervention would jeopardize the rushed FDA approval of patented vaccines and medicines for which the pharmaceutical industry stands to rake in billions upon billions of dollars in sales on an ongoing basis. 3 citations. There is mounting evidence that histamine blockers such as diphenhydramine, famotidine, ranitidine, and cimetidine may have utility in treating COVID-19, possibly by direct antiviral effects or acting to reduce mast cell activation in addition to modulating redox activity. 4 citations. Melatonin has been found to have some utility as an adjunct treatment for COVID-19. 2 citations. So have indomethacin, budesonide, and other immunomodulatory treatments. Indomethacin was known to be directly antiviral against SARS-CoV. 1 citation. The next section deals with COVID-19 transmission. COVID-19 is airborne. Initially, the World Health Organization, or WHO, carried water for China by claiming that the virus was only droplet-borne. Our own CDC absurdly claimed that it was mostly transmitted by fomite-to-face contact, which, given its rapid spread from Wuhan to the rest of the world, would have been physically impossible. 4 citations. The ridiculous belief in fomite-to-face being a primary mode of transmission led to the use of surface disinfection protocols that wasted time, energy, productivity, and disinfection. 1 citation. The 6-foot guidelines are absolutely useless. The minimum safe distance to protect oneself from an aerosolized virus is to be 15 plus feet away from an infected person, no closer. Realistically, no public transit is safe. 3 citations. Surgical masks and cloth masks do not protect you from an aerosol. The virus is too small and the filter media has too large of gaps to filter it out. They may catch respiratory droplets and keep the virus from being expelled by someone who is sick, but they do not filter a cloud of infectious aerosols if someone were to walk into said cloud. 2 citations. The minimum level of protection against this virus is quite literally a P100 respirator, a PAPR/CAPR, or a 40 millimeter NATO CBRN respirator, ideally paired with a full-body Tyvek or Tychem suit, gloves, and booties, with all the holes and gaps taped. 4 citations. Live SARS-CoV-2 may potentially be detected in sewage outflows, and there may be oral fecal transmission. 3 citations. During the SARS outbreak in 2003, in the Amoy Gardens incident, hundreds of people were infected by aerosolized fecal matter rising from floor drains in their apartments. 3 citations. COVID-19 vaccine dangers. The vaccines for COVID-19 are not sterilizing and do not prevent infection or transmission. They are quote-unquote leaky vaccines. This means they remove the evolutionary pressure on the virus to become less lethal. It also means that the vaccinated are perfect carriers. In other words, those who are vaccinated are a threat to the unvaccinated, not the other way around. 4 citations. Natural immunity to COVID-19 from a past infection is far more robust than vaccine-induced immunity. This is because the immune system is exposed to all of the pathogen's proteins, not just one single protein in isolation. 2 citations. All of the COVID-19 vaccines currently in use have undergone minimal testing with highly accelerated clinical trials. Though they appear to limit severe illness, the long-term safety profile of these vaccines remains unknown. 2 citations. Some of these so-called vaccines utilize an untested new technology that has never been used in vaccines before. Traditional vaccines use weakened or killed virus to stimulate an immune response. The Moderna and Pfizer-BioNTech vaccines do not. They are purported to consist of an intramuscular shot containing a suspension of lipid nanoparticles filled with messenger RNA. 4 citations. The way they generate an immune response is by fusing with cells in a vaccine recipient's shoulder, undergoing endocytosis, releasing their mRNA cargo into those cells, and then utilizing the ribosomes in those cells to synthesize modified SARS-CoV-2 spike proteins in vivo. 2 citations. These modified spike proteins then migrate to the surface of the cell, where they are anchored in place by a transmembrane domain. The adaptive immune system detects the non-human viral protein being expressed by these cells and then forms antibodies against that protein. This is purported to confer protection against the virus by training the adaptive immune system to recognize and produce antibodies against the spike on the actual virus. 2 citations. The J&J and AstraZeneca vaccines do something similar, but use an adenovirus vector for genetic material delivery instead of a lipid nanoparticle. 1 citation. These vaccines were produced or validated with the aid of fetal cell lines, HEK-293 and PER.6C, which people with certain religious convictions may object strongly to. 2 citations. SARS-CoV-2 spike is a highly pathogenic protein on its own. It is impossible to overstate the danger presented by introducing this protein into the human body. 2 citations. It is claimed by vaccine manufacturers that the vaccine remains in cells in the shoulder and that SARS-CoV-2 spike produced and expressed by these cells from the vaccine's genetic material is harmless and inert, thanks to the insertion of prolines in the spike sequence to stabilize it in the perfusion conformation, preventing the spike from becoming active and fusing with other cells. 2 citations. However, A pharmacokinetic study from Japan showed that the lipid nanoparticles and mRNA from the Pfizer vaccine did not stay in the shoulder and in fact bioaccumulated in many different organs, including the reproductive organs and adrenal glands, meaning that modified spike is being expressed, quite literally, all over the place. One citation. These lipid nanoparticles may trigger anaphylaxis in an unlucky few, but far more concerning is the unregulated expression of spike in various somatic cell lines, far from the injection site and the known consequences of that. 2 citations. Messenger RNA is normally consumed right after it is produced in the body, being translated into a protein by a ribosome. 1 citation. COVID-19 vaccine mRNA is produced outside the body long before a ribosome translates it. In the meantime, it could accumulate damage if inadequately preserved. When a ribosome attempts to translate a damaged strain of mRNA, it can become stalled. When this happens, the ribosome becomes useless for translating proteins because it now has a piece of mRNA stuck in it, like a lace card or an old punch card reader. The whole thing is not being cleaned up and new ribosomes synthesized to replace it. 2 citations. In cells with low ribosome turnover, like nerve cells, this can lead to reduced protein synthesis, cytopathic effects, and neuropathies. 3 citations. Certain proteins, including SARS-CoV-2 spike, have proteolytic cleavage sites that are basically like little dotted lines that say cut here, which attract a living organism's own proteases, essentially molecular scissors, to cut them. 1 citation. There is a possibility that S1 may be proteolytically cleaved from S2, causing active S1 to float away into the bloodstream, while leaving the S2 stalk embedded in the membrane of the cell that expressed the protein. 6 citations. SARS-CoV-2 spike has a superantigenic region, SAG, which may promote extreme inflammation. 2 citations. In one study, the Pfizer BNT162b2 vaccine was found to reprogram adaptive and innate immune responses in such a way that TLR4 surveillance is reduced. 1 citation. Anti-spike antibodies were found in one study to function as autoantibodies and attack the body's own cells. 1 citation. Those who have been immunized with COVID-19 vaccines have developed blood clots, myocarditis, Guillain-Barré syndrome, Bell's palsy, and multiple sclerosis flares, indicating that the vaccine promotes autoimmune reactions against healthy tissues. 4 citations. SARS-CoV-2 spike does not only bind to ACE2, it was suspected to have regions that bind to basigan, integrins, neuropilin-1, bacterial lipopolysaccharides as well. 5 citations. SARS-CoV-2 spike on its own can potentially bind any of these things and act as a ligand for them, triggering unspecified and likely highly inflammatory cellular activity. 1 citation. SARS-CoV-2 spike contains an unusual PRRA insert that forms a furin cleavage site. Furin is ubiquitous human protease, making this an ideal property for the spike to have, giving it a high degree of cell tropism. No wild-type SARS-like coronaviruses related to SARS-CoV-2 possess this feature, making it highly suspicious and perhaps a sign of human tampering. 5 citations. SARS-CoV-2 spike has a prion-like domain that enhances its infectiousness. 3 citations. The spike S1RBD may bind to heparin-binding proteins and promote amyloid aggregation. In humans, this could lead to Parkinson's, Lewy body dementia, premature Alzheimer's, and various other neurodegenerative diseases. 1 citation. This is very concerning because SARS-CoV-2, S1, is capable of injuring and penetrating the blood-brain barrier and entering the brain. It is also capable of increasing the permeability of the blood-brain barrier to other molecules. 3 citations. For those who aren't aware, some viruses, including beta coronaviruses, have a feature called ADE. There is also something called original antigenic sin, which is the observation that the body prefers to produce antibodies based on previously encountered strains of a virus over newly encountered ones. 2 citations. In ADE, antibodies from a previous infection become non-neutralizing due to mutations in the virus's proteins. These non-neutralizing antibodies then act as Trojan horses, allowing live, active virus to be pulled into macrophages through their Fc receptor pathways, allowing the virus to infect immune cells that it would not have been able to infect before. This has been known to happen with dengue fever. When someone gets sick with dengue, recovers, and then contracts a different strain, they can get very, very ill. 2 citations. If someone is vaccinated with mRNA based on the spike from the initial Wuhan strain of SARS-CoV-2, and then they become infected with a future mutated strain of the virus, they may become severely ill. In other words, it is possible for vaccines to sensitize someone to disease. There is a precedent for this in recent history. Sanofi's Dengvaxia vaccine for dengue failed because it caused immune sensitization in people whose immune systems were dengue naive. 4 citations. In mice immunized against SARS-CoV and challenged with the virus, a close relative of SARS-CoV-2, they developed immune sensitization, Th2 immunopathology, and eosinophil infiltration in their lungs. 1 citation. We have been told that SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccines cannot be integrated into the human genome because messenger RNA cannot be turned back into DNA. This is false. There are elements in human lines called LINE-1 retrotransposons, which can indeed integrate mRNA into a human genome by endogenous reverse transcription. Because the mRNA used in the vaccines is stabilized, it persists inside cells for a longer period of time, increasing the chances for this to happen. If the gene for SARS-CoV-2 spike is integrated into a portion of the genome that is not silent and actually expresses a protein, it is possible that people who take this vaccine may continuously express SARS-CoV-2 spike from their somatic cells for the rest of their lives. 3 citations. By inoculating people with a vaccine that causes their cells to express spike proteins, they are being inoculated with a pathogenic protein, a toxin that may cause inflammation, heart problems, and a raised risk of cancers. In long term, it may also potentially lead to premature neurodegenerative disease. Absolutely nobody should be compelled to take this vaccine under any circumstances, and in actual fact, the vaccination campaign must be stopped immediately. Well, that's all I have for you today. I think that's enough. There are more sections to this letter. I may be inclined to read those, or you can read them. What I've gone through, I think, is the most technically difficult with the words. I apologize for some of you who may know some of these words and I've pronounced them poorly in your view. I grant that may be the case. Hopefully you understood what I was saying, because it is highly technical and you're the only one who would understand what I'm saying. For the most of us, it is a little bit over our heads. On the other hand, this is a real concern to me that something like this could take over the medical community, and I'm part of that as a healthcare provider. I care about what happens to my medical colleagues and to patients in all levels of medical and dental care. It's important to us as a community, as a society, that we have the ability, and I've said this before on other podcasts, what I really want is the ability to read and debate and criticize and run tests and be active in all of this. Anything that's shutting down debate, I'm against. I don't know that what I've read to you is the truth. I'm sure there are many things that are not necessarily completely true, but as far as I'm concerned, this is the clearest explanation for me as to where we are right now. I know that this debate, on the one hand, has gone between, oh, it's just a cold, to, oh, no, this is deadly. And both are true. So now we know why. It's not like a cold because it isn't a flu. It has flu-like symptoms, but it really is a blood and vascular circulatory disease, not a pulmonary disease. The pulmonary element is just one side of this. That's an important finding, I believe. And my hope is that if this is passed around to those who really do treat patients in ICUs and other places, they will look more seriously at intubation and other ventilators and all the rest of it as to whether or not this is a wise method. And if there are governmental pushes for people to do certain protocols for money, my prayer and hope for my colleagues is that they will resist this because it is morally wrong. And I know it's easy for me to say I'm not in that position, but still I can tell you that if it's morally wrong, don't do it. And I won't do it either. It's the type of thing where this is the hill to die on. We need to preserve medicine for our people, for patients, not for an elite, not for a pharmaceutical industry. These people are not to be experimented on. We're to care for them, and this is the very system. If we are physicians and dentists and others, this is the very system we want to be doing well for our children and grandchildren when we're not around. We want to leave something behind that is high quality. And what disturbs me the most about all of this is that it is harming a very good reputation that we once had that was trusted. When people are sick and they trust you with their lives and they're ill, and then for some reason the best care is not provided because of economic incentives or because some pharmaceutical company is in control or in charge or governing or things we don't even know about, well, then we are in trouble. And the stain of this will be long lasting. How will we recover from it as professionals if we don't stand up to it now? With regards to the masking and all of that, I'm so sorry there's so many people walking around wearing masks. I think for the most part, what they are doing is admitting they don't have the understanding of the problem enough to fight against a system. But those of you who do understand and can understand what I've been describing at the biochemical level and at the clinical levels, you do know. And so it's upon you and me to, as best we can and as gently as we can, to describe and explain what we understand now. And if the thing has been going wrong, I think we have to admit it. We have to say this is wrong and we have to change. So that's my rant. I'm done now. Thank you for listening. Please comment if you want. Let me know what you think. And if you want me to read more, I'm happy to do so. This has been the Perio Patient and the Perio Hygienist podcast with one or the other. I'm still Dr. Ben Young. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.